Soul Edge, one of the 2 ultimate weapons you get through Weapon Master mode. Everyone has a variation of Soul Edge, complete, including Nightmare himself. Just like the legendary weapons, you have to decipher what effect it has during gameplay, while the game gives out a vague hints such as, "Here's some demonic weapons said to absorb life," or, "Here's some demonic weapons said to excel in offense and defense." Unfortunately, most of them are not worth sacrificing your soul just for an ugly-ass fleshy sword. Maybe not all of them are bad. Let's find out which of them are either worth using, or the ones that should be avoided at all costs. We're going from bottom to top right away.
Damn!
Starting with the bottom of the barrel, Ivy's variant has more downsides than buffs. The 20% damage buff is minor compared to the other Soul Edge variants and her other weapons. Most of the Soul Edge variants sap your HP whether over time or when you attack. This one not only drains your health over time, it drops your HP even more through Soul Charge, as if Soul Charging wasn't risky enough to begin with. But hey, at least you got that damage buff. Temporarily. Most of her weapons are better than this. Easily the worst variant of Soul Edge complete. Astra's Soul Edge is the next on the damned tier. This one also has a 20% damage buff. It also makes more of his moves unblockable through Soul Charge. At least you don't lose more HP over time when charging, but it still saps your health over time. This one is more boring than the rest of the variants. Astaroth already has some unblockable moves without even needing the Soul Charge to begin with. This weapon is improved in Soul Calibur 3 because you can drain the enemy's HP to make up for damage over time. His legendary weapon Thanatos is miles better than this. As much as I am ashamed to admit it, even Nightmare's Soul Edge complete joins the damned tier as well. Despite the disgusting appearance, it looks like a strong weapon. It has a huge 40% buff on base damage and defense, and boosts even more through Soul Charge, while sapping your HP. Just like Ivy's Soul Edge, not only does it drain your health, it reduces more HP through Soul Charge. I know the power boost is tempting, but the health drop really sets it back. This game has that classic cheap AI that won't let you breathe for one moment, and the last thing you want is your HP to drain over time. Nightmare already has some viable weapons. Glam is a really good weapon in the early game, then later on you get Soul Edge Growth, which recovers health over time with the attack buff, but takes chip damage when you guard, just like Cassandra's Valkyrie. And speaking of legendaries, his Soul Calibur variant needs no introduction. It's the best weapon in the whole game hands down. But if you really want to use Soul Edge for Nightmare, stick with Growth instead of Complete. These variants are still left to be desired, but not as bad as the damned tier. Mitsurugi's variant is one of them. It's the usual 30% damage buff with minus 3 HP over time, and that's pretty much it. No Soul Charge buff, no chip damage, not even absorb enemies' health. This variant is the most boring out of all of them. Masamune and Damascus Sword on the other hand are chads compared to the Virgin Soul Edge. Keelik's variant is nothing special other than the 40% damage boost. Other buffs worth noting are faster Soul Charge and easier to break horizontal attacks with verticals. It sounds good on paper, but I barely noticed the Soul Charge speed difference compared to the others. Just like most of the variants, the HP loss over time can be a liability. Aside from the others, it's nothing special. His buddy Maxi doesn't fare much either, 30% damage buff and deals chip damage. Sounds neat, right? Aggressive fighter dealing big damage and considerable chip damage? But yeah, sucks out your health as much as Nightmare's variant. Another decent sounding weapon on paper, being screwed over by damaging the user over time. I'll take not being able to guard over losing health any day. Valdo is an excellent offensive character to use. This variant is very risky on Valdo, 35% buff damage and deals chip damage. However, it hurts Valdo whenever he attacks. The best way to utilize this, and some of the later ones on the list, Throw Spam! You still have to be careful using these variants, otherwise you're gonna end up reenacting Yoshimitsu's Seppuku. Cassandra's variant shares the same boat as Valdo. Instead of dealing chip damage, hers deals counter damage. 35% damage buff with guaranteed counter hits sounds like big damage, right? And like before, her Soul Edge also hurts her when she attacks. Even though it's the best one on the crap tier, it's still risky to use. Again, throwing will be a decent last ditch effort when your health is low and you don't want to shave off your remaining HP. Instead of Soul Edge complete, use Valkyrie. Now that the damned crap variants are out of the way, Let's take a look at the ones that are a mixed bag. Not terrible, but not good at the same time. Taki's Soul Edge is another case of a risky weapon with good buffs. 40% damage and defense buff, but it comes at a cost of minus 3 HP on the attack. The defense boost is a saving grace because the other variants make you a glass cannon. I wish I could say the same with Nightmare's variant, but I can't because of one very obvious problem.
How?
It's not as bad, but I wouldn't use this over Chris Naga. Cervantes is next on the between tier. This one is the half of the variants that recover HP when hitting your foes. The damage buff is also nice, 40%. This is yet another one that drains your health but at a severe rate, losing 4 HP per second this time. This may seem harsh, but the recovery makes up for it slightly, just slightly. I would have rated it higher if it wasn't for the harsh health drop over time. Even his legendary weapon Leafy is worth using more than Soul Edge. Should have used this OG Soul Edge instead of this. Xianghua's Soul Edge is another variant that adds more unblockable attacks through Soul Charge. Its damage buff is smaller compared to the others, 20%. Minus points for losing health when attacking. I thought it would be as terrible as the others, but not really. Xianghua is also a high tier character to begin with, and she also has better weapons already. Not the worst, but also not the best. A prime example of the between tier. Also throw spam when in doubt. GameCube exclusive Link is next on the tier. For once, it doesn't look butt ugly. The buffs are pretty good too, 40% on attack and 35% on defense. It drains 2 points of health over time. Like I said, the defense buff saves it from being lower. It's a basic variation, but not as boring as Mitsurugi's Soul Edge. Even with all of that, his legendary weapon, Great Fairy Sword, is miles better than this Soul Edge. Link's variation is similar to Raphael's, 40% attack buff, but has 30% defense buff, so it has 5% less than Link's. Oh right, can't forget about the loss of health over time, minus 2 health. Raphael's Soul Edge isn't too bad for what it is. It's the best on the B tier. The damage and defensive buff works well for him either way. Queen's Guard is still his best weapon regardless.
Awesome!
These variants of Soul Edge Complete are the saving grace compared to the rest. From here on, they recover health whenever you hit your opponent. Starting off the awesome tier is Heihachi Mishima. His Soul Edge works similar to, I'm gonna save it for later. Anyway, as I said, this one recovers 33% health on hit and has a whopping 40% damage buff. It comes at a cost of losing 30% of defense. I'm not too fond of Heihachi in this game, but his Soul Edge makes up for it, just by a little bit. It may make him more of a glass cannon, but at least it's worth using more than Tekken, which ironically drains his health. Another character that I dislike in this game, Yun Sung, has a good Soul Edge. Despite the fugly design, its 30% damage buff and 20% regen on health helps out. Unlike the rest of the variants that sap your health over time or each attack, you take plenty of chip damage, almost the amount of damage that you take without guarding. It's basically a better version of Ramdao minus the longer range and taking guaranteed counter damage. Oh man, I can't believe Yun Sung of all people has a solid variant. Necrid is one of the two on this tier that has the health loss over time drawback. It's just as brutal as Cervantes' Soul Edge. However, one buff makes up for it and surpasses the lower tier. Sure, the 30% damage buff isn't as much as the 40%. Landing hits heals off 30% of damage instead of 20%. The rest of his weapons aren't noteworthy aside from his legendary, which copies the same weapon effects as your foes besides the range. I thought I wouldn't like it because of the minus 4 health over time, but the damage and healing is a good enough fix. This variant is just as underrated as Necrid himself. However, Spawn's Soul Edge is better than Necrid's variant. It deals as much damage as Cervantes' Soul Edge, but it doesn't heal as much as Necrid's. The self-damage over time is more forgiving than the other two, minus 3 health over time instead of 4. Still, you have to be more offensive to heal off that damage. At last, the damage over time curse is over, but the damage per attack doesn't stop yet. Sophitia's Pizza Slice, Soul Edge Complete is the last entry of the awesome tier. Attacking takes away 3 points of health, but here's the kicker. It heals up 30% of damage, outweighing the damage on attack whenever she hits someone. Oh, and 30% damage buff, can't forget about that. This alone makes it the top spot of A tier. She can make up for that lost health pretty fast, as long as she has more than 10% health. If not, well, fuck it, throw spam.
Oh!
These Soul Edge variants not only don't harm your HP, they have more pros than cons. I was going to put Heihachi's variant on this tier, but Talem's Soul Edge is better overall because I personally think she has a better moveset in general. 40% damage buff and breaks horizontal attacks with vertical attacks. Whoops, I forgot to mention that on Heihachi. The only drawback is the 30% defense nerf, but the only difference is that it doesn't heal as much as Heihachi's. 20% doesn't seem too good. Okay, never mind. On paper it doesn't sound like it's as good as you'd think, but nope. Need I remind you that Talem can deal Astaroth levels of big damage, with or without Soul Charge? The defense nerf makes her a glass cannon, but it's still worth using. It's just as good as her legendary weapon, which is a Soul Calibur variant. Yoshimitsu's creepy eye flag is next on the S tier. Big damage buff. 40% exactly, and 40% healing on hit. Yes, 40%. That's a lot of healing. The only drawback is that you cannot block. It acts similarly to Astaroth's legendary weapon, Thanatos. Another great weapon with the same drawback. You can still guard impact at least. This is a pure offensive weapon that's even better than his legendary weapon, and you don't even need a Soul Charge to make it work. And finally, the best variant of Soul Edge, complete, goes to Seongmina. The damage buff is 25%, and the healing off of hits is yet again a whopping 40%. The only downside is that you are guaranteed to take counter hits, but that can be brushed off by the upsides easily. This beast of a weapon can fill up your lost HP pretty fast. It's another variant that is better than her annoying legendary. We don't speak of that blue feathered torturing device. It is easily the best variant of Soul Edge complete, by far. So there you have it. I've listed off what variation of Soul Edge complete is either CBT or underdogs. What do you think of these weapons? Let me know in the comments below if you think so or otherwise. The legend will never die. Except for these 3 variants.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more of my stuff, subscribe and hit the bell, okay? Thanks, bye.